Hello, everyone. This is Vernon Vincent here, coming to you from the left coast in our 14th month of COVID lockdown. I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's ReShape Lifesciences webinar. The time is now, lap band resurgence. Thank you for honoring us with your time and interest today. With all the Zoom fatigue, over 40 of you have decided to register. There must be something interesting here, and we appreciate your interest. I'm happy to report that I recently actually left Camp Vincent for a work road trip to be with a surgeon for their proctoring for their very first lap band case. He was one of 3 who recently completed basic training with me. I'll be with the other 2 soon as they line up their first lap band patients. It is happening. Next slide. Some basic housekeeping. All attendees are muted. Please send questions to the chat function bottom right of the toolbar. You type in your questions, we'll curate those and answer them as best we can at the end. If we run out of time, committed to writing you back individually with answers by next week. At the end of the webinar, as soon as you log off, a survey pops up. If you would kindly take a minute and answer a few questions for us, help us improve as we continue this program. Next slide. Just like to remind you that all of our webinars are archived and available for you to watch. We've covered lap band myths, best practices, lap band aftercare, how to leverage lap bands in an ASC, how to salvage bands rather than harvest them, and marketing a lap band practice tips and more. Each webinar is available at any time. You can contact me, you can take a look on our LinkedIn page, you can ask your ReShape account representative for the link. I'm happy to provide those to you. You are among like-minded, very experienced friends from across the United States, those who continue to want to provide the lap band. Thank you. Next slide. We're also very proud to continue our development and launch of ReShape Care, ReShape's newest offering. What is ReShape Care? It's a physician-prescribed and clinically proven virtual wellness program individually designed to fit a patient's needs and lifestyle throughout their weight loss journey. Next slide, please. ReShape Care focuses on nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress, utilizing virtual coaching with board-certified health coaches to supplement your integrated health team's efforts as an extension of your program. ReShape Care is for all patients, new, current, past, and all procedures, not just the lap band patients. MBSA QIP follow-up requirements and continuous improvement projects can also be supported by ReShape Care. And it's free to most patients and absolutely free to all providers, you. And it provides a new revenue stream. Interested? Give me a call or connect with your ReShape representative. My obligation with this webinar, as with all the rest and all of our activities, is to provide value for your time. And with that in mind, let's get to it. Next slide, please. We have an expert faculty who have shared their experiences, will have grown and actually expanded their lap band practices in this year of COVID. And if the faculty will all come back on and join me. Today we have the spectrum of practice types represented with Christine Wren-Fielding, Professor of Surgery at NYU, Darren Hansen at the Utah Lap Band Weight Loss Surgery Center, and Harold Ken at the Georgia Coastal Surgical and Spa. 3 very different and yet similar stories of persistence with the lap band. And I'm gonna just say in advance that one of them is truly a story of coming back from the dead, and we'll save that for later. Next slide, please. Our first presenter is Dr. Christine Wren-Fielding, Professor of Surgery at NYU School of Medicine, Division of Bariatric Surgery, Director of NYU Langone Weight Loss Management Center. And I lost track now how many years it's been, but I first met you in surgery during your fellowship.
That's right. Well, that's going to be the first slide, Vern.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us today, Christine. Okay. Take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for joining me after a long day's work. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about myself. I started bariatric surgery in my fellowship in 1999 as a fellow at Mount Sinai, guided by Michelle Gagne and Barry Salke. And I started at NYU Medical Center, just out of fellowship as a first year attending at 2000. And that's really when I got to know Vern, because the next year was when the lap band got approved. So it's ironic that we are having this webinar on the 20th anniversary of the lap band approval by the FDA. And that's where I went down to Louisville, Kentucky, did a lap band workshop, met George, and after some time, I've done a lot of lap bands, probably close to 4,000 now, for all procedures. Really, at that time, it was gastric bypass and duodenal switches, and then the lap band came into play in our program. And right now, we've grown our program to have 4 surgeons, bariatric surgeons. We have 3 nurse practitioners, 1 PA, 3 full-time dietitians, MA, psychologists, social workers, and we at NYU we do about 1,300 cases a year and 1,000 office visits a month. Next slide. So we've grown it into a very, very busy practice. But as you all have known, that there's been a shift in the profile of type of operations we're doing, and as this is a little bit of an older slide, but we see that things have continued, that the sleeve gastrectomy has increased in its numbers. The band has decreased in its numbers. The bypass has actually stayed roughly the same. And what's also really grown are revisions. And that's been pretty steady. Next slide. And what the way that we utilize lap band is always really going along the dictum of using the band as an appetite suppressant and a satiety tool. And we've always prescribed to subscribe to that, and we have these green zone charts blown up in frames in all 7 of our exam rooms, so that we teach the patient that the band is an interactive tool. It's something that we're going to use, not just operate on you, install it, and then leave you to your own devices. And we provide a lot of support and aftercare. Next slide. But although this is an 8-year-old paper, it shows some really honest truths. This paper came out of the Michigan Collaborative Consortium, next slide, and really studied 3 very, very equally matched groups, almost 3,000 band patients, 3,000 sleeve patients, and 3,000 gastric bypass patients. And they looked at the outcomes. Next slide. And what we found, or what they found, was that, to what we've known, the complication rate of lap bands is markedly lower as compared to sleeves and gastric bypasses. And I think this has always been the real strength of the lap band, and certainly what is attractive to most of the patients who choose to have lap band surgery. And you see that for gastric bypass, which is the gold standard, it still carries 10% complication rate in the first 30 days, if not a little bit more. Next slide. Similarly, 3-year data show that the average weight loss is going to be lower with lap band and highest with gastric bypass. But when you really look at the numbers, you'll see that at 3 years, the average sleeve gastrectomy patient will lose 20 pounds more than the average lap band patient. So you'll have to really look at that. And I've always looked at is what is the risk benefit ratio, because you see that there are higher risks with the stapling procedures. But again, this is nothing new. And I just wanted to bring this up for those of you who may have forgotten this data. Next slide. But I think what the real crux of lap band surgery was published in this paper in 2013 by the LABS Consortium, which, as you know, is an NIH-funded study that prospectively collects data on bariatric patients prospectively. Next slide. And when you look at the lap band group, the patients with lap band, you see that it's not an average weight loss that people lose. There's a spectrum. There is a bell curve distribution of what patients lose. And as you can see on the bottom, that a clear 20% of patients do great. They have a change of anywhere between 30 and 40% weight change in weight loss. 20% do dismally, and a full 60% do medium. They do pretty well. They have a good moderate weight loss. And so as you can see that there is benefit for the lap band, but it would be great to really tap into who are the patients, those 20% that are going to do great and the 60% that's going to do medium. Next slide. Well, I'll get to that in a little while, but again, just to review that there's some long-term data out there that still holds true. Again, this is the 15-year data from Melbourne, Australia by Paul O'Brien's group. And we see that if you lose weight, you're more likely to keep it off. And at 15 years, the average weight loss is 47% excess weight loss. Next slide. And there's a lot of long-term data out there. And this is old long-term data. It's hard to get new long-term data because most journals won't publish it. And I can tell you from experience that we've tried to publish our long-term data and nobody's interested. So I'm showing you old data. And these are a variety of groups that, if you look on the right-hand column, there is a significant amount of band revision and band removal. And I think that's what's been the growing mantra of anti-bands, is that you're removing all these bands. It's terrible. Next slide. Well, let's look at this a little bit closely. Himpin's study looked at 150 patients over 12 years, and 50% of the bands were removed. However, when you look at the other 50% that kept their bands in, they had a 48% excess weight loss. Same thing with Suter. He had over 300 patients, 7 years, took out 21% of the bands, but the 60% that kept the bands in had the rest of the bands, 80%, had a 59 to 60% excess weight loss. So that's really, really good. So sure, some people are going to have no band, but the people are going to keep their bands in do really well. Next slide. But how about, this is a question that I asked many, many years ago, is that, well, does aftercare matter? Can you impact the change in weight loss after lap bands? And again, in 2004, I wrote this paper with my fellow, and we looked that if you have patients with lap bands and they come in from 6 or more visits a year, they will have 50% excess weight loss, as opposed to those patients who come in fewer times and their excess weight loss is significantly lower at 42%. And not surprisingly, the patients who had a gastric bypass, it didn't matter if they came in compliantly with their follow-ups or they didn't. They still had the same weight loss at about 65% excess weight loss. And that's very attractive to surgeons who don't want to do aftercare. And I think that probably contributes to some of the excitement and enthusiasm with the sleeve gastrectomy. Next slide. But we should learn from experienced centers. We're not the only experienced center. This is out of the UK, 9-year data with lap bands. And we found that actually there are some people who do better long-term with weight loss after lap bands, and those happen to be patients with a BMI of less than 50. So that's pretty interesting. Next slide. The next group that gave in their long-term data was from Italy. And they had 15-year data, and this is a big group. This is 3,500 patients, and they implemented an interdisciplinary team. They prepared and selected the patients. They gave them a lot of education, and they did a lot of really, truly multidisciplinary interactions that I think a lot of people talk about but don't actually do. And they found that at 10 years, at 49% excess weight loss, and at 15 plus years, they actually took out less than 10% of their bands. Next slide. So let's look at the band revisions. We found that in this paper by Tsai, there were 340 lap band patients over 15 years, and 82% had a mean reoperative number of bariatric operations, which seems like a lot. And actually 65% converted to gastric bypass. But the good thing is that even though they're having these operations, there are no deaths. So yes, the band is not perfect, but if it needs to be revised or converted, it's quite safe. And actually 28% of the band stayed in place, and they had a 65% excess BMI decrease. So again, you have to look at this as a perspective. Next slide, please. So again, perception. I think we have to reframe this. and really look at obesity as a chronic lifelong condition, which has a high recidivism. We talk about this all the time. At conferences, we hear, yeah, obesity is a chronic disease, but you really have to believe in it. Why? Because it's going to come back no matter what operation you do. So you have to have an accepted recidivism. I hate to use failure, but a recidivism or recurrence rate. And all bariatric procedures have their strengths and weaknesses, and all of them have some sort of recidivism. There's no one treatment for a multifactorial chronic disease, and the focus should be on improving the options rather than denigrating the effective ones that you may not understand. Next slide. So to me, I always look at lap band as an option that is sort of the first line option, just like Lasix is to hypertension treatment, like metformin is to diabetes treatment, like cardiac stenting is to coronary artery disease, and breast conservation therapy is to breast cancer. I mean, just because we have Saxenda and Ozempic and Bydureon, we're not throwing metformin out the window. We're still starting with metformin and then progressively increasing or changing the treatment. And by taking away a valid treatment option for the chronically ill, i.e. lap band, you are denying patients the access to a safe option, which is a valid first-line treatment. And so we wonder why that less than 2% of the morbidly obese actually have surgery, because they're probably really scared of the other options. Next slide. So the lap band may not be the definitive treatment for all comers, and I think we've learned that, but it may delay the need for more aggressive treatment. Nowadays, with medications such as liraglutide or semaglutide, which is Saxenda, and Victoza, Ozempic, Rybelsus, these medications really magnify or can compound the effect of lap band. And we can use medications as an adjunct treatment, and we do that a lot, not only for lap band patients, but for sleeve gastrectomy patients and for gastric bypass patients. We use the cancer model, really, to look at a multidisciplinary treatment, which includes medications on top of surgery. Next slide. And again, devices intrinsically have a failure rate, and I don't think that it's bad that bands have to be removed in a lot of people. You know, there's VP shunts, the overall failure rate is 46%. It doesn't mean that we don't put VP shunts in. Joint replacement failure rate is 1% per year, and most of them have to be replaced at 10 years. We don't stop doing them. Cardiac pacemaker revision rate is anywhere up from 0 to 12%. And breast implants, they have a 50% revision or removal rate at 15 years. So there is room for device and development and improvement, but right now, I think it is not terrible that there is long-term issues with a lap band, because that's just the nature of the device. Next slide, please. So what have we learned? What have I learned? Well, I think we try to find the best responders. They typically will probably be anyone who's lost more than 50 pounds of weight before they have any type of surgery. The ones that are more physically active, those who are younger age, lower BMI, and of course those who want to have children, the women who want to be pregnant. I think lap band is a wonderful option for them because it's so versatile. Those who are lesser responders to lap band are probably going to be those with increasing age, define that as you will, increasing BMI over 50, 55, severe type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, poor physical ability, and chronic pain. Next slide. So what is the role of lap band? Well, it's to offer a weight loss option to patients who are afraid of having their stomachs removed, stapled, or rerouted, because otherwise they'll do nothing. So yeah, sometimes I'll offer this to a BMI of 60 person, knowing that they won't have anything else, but maybe it'll open the door for them to then say, you know what, band didn't work. I'm more comfortable with having a gastric bypass. Maybe those who are lower BMI of less than 35. Maybe adolescents. It's not indicated for anyone below age 18. And we used to perform lap bands on teenagers because we had an IDE in an IRB study. So they used to be a group, but we don't offer that anymore because we don't have that legal documentation. But women who want to have children, first stage operation for high risk patients, and first line intervention for a lifelong chronic condition. Next slide. So in conclusion, lap band surgery is a perfectly valid and effective option for treatment of obesity because it is safe, it has efficacy, it's versatile, it's revisable, and it's conversional. And the best results are going to be patient selection. And it's not going to be easy, but I think that we can sort of look at what we've learned and perhaps utilize it in a more tailored scenario. Next slide. I do have, want to tell you about what our lap band numbers have been at NYU. So George Fielding, Brad Schreck, and myself have done the majority of the lap bands at NYU. And in 2017, 18, and 19, we each did 50 lap bands each. So 150 lap bands per year. COVID stopped it, but we still had 35 bands each. So we are on since COVID, which is about midsummer last year. So we're doing better. We're going back to pre-COVID numbers. Next slide. Sorry, I confused you about the back slide. But in conclusion, gastric banding has its complications. There are millions of people who will not have their stomach stapled. Most operations have a 5 to 10 year lifespan anyway, so band is sort of within that scenario. And the outcomes are better when gastric bands are performed and managed by experienced centers. Next slide. I do have one final disclosure. That's a conflict of interest, and that's my husband has had his band for 21 years. He's maintained a 95-pound weight loss. It's 80% excess weight loss. He still has the same band, the original band. He's never had a revision, a conversion, or a removal of his band, and there are thousands like him out there. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Christine. That was an excellent presentation of the data and the position. I just want to go back to the first day I met you. I honestly then didn't know the chief that walked into the room. I was in the OR with you, with your the Rat Pack. All of you were there, Emma and Marina and you all in for a case. And the case was Michel Gagne's case. Didn't know him then. And I just want to say to the world, isn't it interesting that you and I are having this conversation today and you're telling the world that lap bands are a really good thing? Just gotta put that out there.
Life is funny.
Yeah, it is what it is. A couple of quick questions. Your slide about your program, you listed enough people to field a football team in the practice. Now there are some programs, and I've been told this repeatedly, I can't afford all these people. I can't do all of that. Do your people work for free?
Well, no. I mean, in addition to having all of our advanced practitioners helping us, all the surgeons do adjustments. All of us have office hours, and we even go to satellite clinics. We have like 8 satellite clinics that the surgeons actually go to. So we all do the work, and also our nurse practitioners and our PAs, we pay them, but we also bill the insurance company. We do get remuneration for the adjustments. We don't do them under fluoro, which does reimburse much more. We do them in the office, but because we do them in the office, then the visits are much shorter.
So they pay for themselves is the answer. They're not working for free.
They pay for themselves, yes.
Yeah, it's always baffled me when people say they can't afford to do it. I would think they can't afford not to do it, but you went over the predictors, outcomes, and John Dixon comes to mind vividly when somebody quoted him incorrectly from the podium. They said, as John Dixon has published, if you're old, higher BMI, have diabetes, and mobile disabilities, you shouldn't have a lap band. Not what I said. I said you should use that information to appropriately counsel your patients about expectations. So that's useful. And a question from the audience is, how soon before we can get you back on the big podium in front of the big screen for this message to be heard by more people? We wish that could happen soon.
Oh yeah, well, anytime. I'm happy to do it.
All right. Well, there'll be some more questions at the end. There are some coming in. Thanks very much. So we'll move on to the next slide and our next presenter and introduce you to Dr. Darren Hansen. Darren's been a very persistent fellow. Darren has come to one of the earliest workshops back in the day. He'll tell you that himself. And he personally holds the world's record, well, the lap band professional education world's record for attending the most lap band professional education events. Once upon a time, we had at least an annual advanced course at MISS, at terrible places like Snowbird, Breckenridge, Whistler. And he attended all of them. I think he only came for the course. He didn't ski. He's been to everything we've ever done. I've got his training record, which is a thick file. He was asked by a corporate individual 7 years ago, and not a current member of the corporate staff, "Are you a slow learner? Why do you keep coming back to these things?" And his answer was great, that every time he is at one of the advanced courses, he got at least one kernel, one tip he could take back and implement, or he confirmed that what he was doing wasn't crazy. Finally, he said, being in a room of like-minded people who don't think you're crazy is refreshing. So we intend to do more of these events and have more team events. And I'll stop, let you carry on with your presentation, Darren. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Vern, and appreciate the opportunity to share my experience. I started doing lap bands in 2003, shortly after it was approved by the FDA, primarily as a backup or alternative to a lot of complications I'd see from other bariatric surgeries, which were primarily gastric bypass. I mean, at that time, there really wasn't anything else. I'm in the greater Salt Lake area, and I came across a magazine article that showed the lap band. I thought, what a novel idea. This is something that could help all the people who were afraid of more aggressive surgeries, which are still existing in the world today, that here's an option for them. And my philosophy has been, and still is, which I believe is a true principle, and that is in medicine or surgery, that you really want to do the minimal amount of either medicine or surgery that's going to take to accomplish your goal, because you can overshoot with too much surgery and too much medicine. And so this lap band, we thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to help people and is a viable option. So we started doing that. I set up the first lap band program. We started in a hospital back then, kept everybody overnight, and have gone on to do more and more procedures, and it's involved in technique and procedure wise. I only do lap bands. I am and currently now a single solo independent surgeon in Salt Lake, in my office by myself. And so it's in contrast to Chris's program, with there's a vast number of surgeons. It's somewhat limiting, and I decided to keep doing that. And I primarily do general surgery. I do more gallbladders, hernias, reflux surgery, appendix, colon cancer, those kind of things, and still alongside concurrently with doing lap bands. And have a program with dedicated nurses who have lap bands themselves, and they help with a lot of the adjustments in the clinic. And we have an open door policy and are happy to help people see in the office anytime that they are needed. I'll talk about my general population, but it's kept us busy, and they're coming in as self-supported their practice in caring for our patients and doing their adjustments and aftercare, which I believe is totally critical. Over the past years, I have done all kinds of things in marketing and how do we get patient information, next slide please, about helping people to come in the door and being aware that this is an option. I'm currently in the top floor of this building you see on the left here. In the bottom first floor of this building is the surgery center where I do most of the lap bands. This is the newest office we've been in the last couple of years. Next slide. And it's been great. So in process of this time in helping lap band patients, my interest has always been to try and learn as much and the newest techniques that are effective in helping people be successful. My goal has been to help lap band patients be successful. And there are a lot of approaches, like Chris alluded to help that happen. And people develop their own techniques and certain pearls that are out there that, hey, this works really well for lap band patients to improve. And I have always been interested in finding out what those were. And I can almost name them, as Vern mentions, on some of these conferences that have made a big difference in either efficiency or improved outcomes. And some of those are included, which are listed here. I do probably about 75 to 80% of the lap band patients a hiatal hernia repair at the same time. That improves outcomes. Chris has some studies that show that. If there's any laxity, I do that. What's called the Patterson stitch. It's modified from that. That's sewing stomach below the band, plicating it over so it's less flexible to slip up through the lap band. I have expanded that and actually do a running proline suture from just below the lap band as kind of an anterior plication down on the front part of the stomach, and has decreased the slip rate on the last time I measured my data to about 2%. It dropped at 60%. And most of my patients, because I do all these lap bands, come back. We have a high follow-up rate. So if somebody has any problems or issues, I usually know about it. And that's made a big difference. And there are other kind of pearls. We have a small office that can come in. We do frequent visits. Another pearl out there that has been validated, and that is they need to be seen frequently. And I have a lap band nurse who will see them. Sometimes people come in just for a weigh-in or just a talk, and that reinforcement helps them. And I don't necessarily have to see every patient. And a lot of surgeons who have started doing lap bands were just, I'm gonna do lap bands, and no, don't come back in, yeah, you're good. They either don't want to or don't have the time for the follow-up. It's very helpful to have that ancillary staff to help be with them, be supportive. I still have an 80-year-old lady who comes in every month just to say hi and to weigh in, doesn't usually get an adjustment, from 18 years ago. And we're happy to see her. She's done really well. Well, next slide, please. So in process of doing all these, and especially when we first started, we started doing these, and within the 6-month period of time, I started the first outpatient lap band surgical center program in Utah. Went and set it up. Hey, we can do these in outpatient. Everybody was doing so well that we could certainly do this and just send them home. And we still do that today. And that was before that was kind of known or a thing to do. And so that dropped the price significantly for people who are paying out of pocket, self-pay patients. And that brought the price down several $1,000s. And in process of that, because the hospitals were just not willing or able to negotiate any kind of decreased pricing for whatever that was, almost all of my patients, self-pay patients, went to a surgical center, and that is still the case. And I'm a little bit unique in that in my area today, 95% of my lap band patients are cash. When the first lap bands first started, there were no insurances that covered lap band procedures, zero. And still, the biggest payers, at least in Utah, don't cover bariatric surgery. And so there's a significant number of patients out there that need help. And boy, I don't have cash to pay for these things. And the bigger operations are very expensive. And if you have a complication, it can be horrendous to cover those risks. And there's a way to mitigate that. But so consequently, I collect a lot of self-pay patients. And honestly, a lot of patients will come in and just say, you know what, I will not, as Chris mentioned, I cannot or will not consider doing these more aggressive operations. I just won't do it. And so this is a very, very good, successful program to help them lose weight, who will not consider anything else, even if it was far inferior, which I don't believe. I mean, lap band has very good results. I have patients who come in saying, oh, I just love my lap band, best thing I've ever done. Now, I'll remind you again, I am seeing only lap bands. I don't do sleeves and bypasses. And so I'm very catered and incentivized to help them do as best that they can. Next slide, please. We tried to do marketing to as awareness. When we first did lap band 2003, first thing in Utah, nobody had ever seen it. We invited the most prominent TV station, came out and did a, here's this new thing that's come out. And over time, we have done all forms of advertising that you could possibly think of. We have done billboards. I've been on multiple noontime home show type things to help people, just more as an educational process to let people know this is an option. People still just don't know what. I have never heard of that. I don't know what that is. Now, with the increase in social media and web availability for information, if somebody just types in, weight loss surgery, most of those options will come up for people. And I still get patients who are searching for that. They look at all the options, decide what their risk tolerance is, and they're like, you know what? I ask them, how did you find me? On Google, online. And probably 85% of my patients come in that way. They're very astute, looking at, what their options are. We started doing seminars when we first instituted our program, and we'd have 30 to 50 people there, primarily coming to get information. There's nowhere else to get it. I've built a pretty robust website myself for patient education. We still do seminars. We've converted those to either YouTube seminars or Zoom seminars, and we still do Zoom support groups for our own practice. We've done Yellow Pages used to charge, $500 a month for just a dollar-size ad, and I mean, that was back before, I think the Yellow Pages kind of gone mostly out, but radio, the billboard things, I was never able to measure an actual significant return of investment on those things. There's a lot of patients who look into some of these things, and the typical patient, waits 18 months before they'd ever act on that. And so it's difficult to track those. Well, next slide, please. We still have the information out there and it's still passed along. I have done monthly articles for over 10 years in a health magazine that's passed around to physician offices and dental offices. I would alternate those with some of, with my general practice with, like Nissen fundoplications for heartburn. A lot of people don't know that there's a option for severe reflux disease. I see them all the time. I didn't know there was an option out there. They just don't know. And so there's an educational component to this, which I'm sure still exists throughout the country. On the left there, you can see that I've got just an article that says this is how it works. And look at our website and check out this information. Next slide, please. So in process of doing this, the ReShape program has had some marketing efforts that they've done in our area that I have immediately seen a significant increase in patients' interest and inflow to our office. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of slides here. Any information that shows the benefit on not in just weight loss, but overall health. For example, in this pregnancy and obesity article, next slide, that I was asked to be a part of, that shows that one of a myriad of benefits from losing weight, not just a lap band, just losing weight. And it significantly helps people lose weight and pull them out of higher risk categories for pregnancy, increased fertility, less risk deliveries. And that was out there in an article, and people will read these things thinking, wow, I really need to lose weight. And if they can't lose it from some other way, well, what's the next thing? Do you jump to a more aggressive operation, or is this something that 80% of people can have benefit or improvement from? Next slide, please. That informational, educational tools for patients help them make decisions, and they may, decide on one operation versus another. But to have that information is very helpful to them, and it's a good program. I still enjoy doing lap bands. I think they work well. I don't think it's for everybody, but I think it's for most people who don't have the ability or need that tool or that help to get them to lose weight, to get them out of that spiral, to be healthier, to then be more active, to eat better as a reminder. And they do well, and most of them are very appreciative of that fact. Next slide, please. Well, so in process of over time of doing these marketing things, as I mentioned, I have the data that I've shared with Vern that in COVID in the last couple of years, as lap bands have been less popular, if you will, the awareness has gone away. And I don't think the effectiveness of the lap band has really changed. There's not something that we're doing really different, but my number of people who are asking for surgical time and consultations has just significantly skyrocketed. You can see my numbers here from even over a year ago. My procedures from a couple of months went up to 16, consults went up tenfold. I have just 17 new requests for surgery this past month in April, when my program is such that people are interested, they look at our website, they decide if they're interested, and they submit some paperwork, just like filling out demographics. And I've had 17 of those just this month. And so I'm on target to do 65 plus cases in 2001, back as it was in my very busy days. Next slide, please. Well, this is a graph that shows that. It kind of shows it ourselves. I still do a fair number of revisions, including revisions from out of state in Mexico and other offices that aren't really interested in supporting the lap band, which is fine. We'll take care of them. We're happy to do it. Next slide, please. Well, I do a little more than just lap bands. We have a major Halloween party thing that we do every year. Do big costume parties. That's me. We do a lot of skiing. I am 30 minutes from the slopes. I tease Vern all the time that, hey, where were you? Great powder day up on the slopes. This is myself and my son. We just went a week and a half ago. It was great. It's about to shut down here in May, but appreciate this opportunity. Come out and see us. Skiing is great. Let me know if I can help anybody with their program.
Yeah, thanks very much, Darren. Yeah, to be clear, last Monday, I'm sweating bullets trying to get these slides done. And Darren writes me about 6 o'clock in the evening and says, sorry, it was a blizzard up, a snowbird today. I was busy. So I respect that, but damn it. You know, I just have to say that the attendance at all those advanced courses over the years gave me hope. People were continued to be interested, but you legitimately, every single opportunity came back. Could you summarize 1 or 2 things that you went back and changed? What did you kind of mentioned hiatal hernia repairs and stuff, but anything else that really, I'll do that, I'll try that, and made a difference in your practice?
Sure. I remember we used to do just some interrupted stitches over the band, and I remember George at some conference saying, you know what, we'd use this little Proline and run a suture and gather, you know, it up. It's a little easier. I think it holds it better. And I thought, you know what, that's great. I started doing that, and I've done that ever since. I've modified it a little bit. The plication stitch under the band, I thought, boy, that's great, because just mechanistically, you know that if people have a bunch of vomiting, they're going to push that stomach up through and get a slip. And wow, that's great. And I've actually expanded on both of those. I gather a whole bunch of stomach up now, not just, you know, a running stitch, but kind of a Z-line imbrication to gather it up, and including below the band to really buttress the stomach around the band. That has significantly dropped the slips. I mean, it came to improved patient outcomes for those things. The approach and where to put ports, a few instrumentation, several things like that have made a big difference on efficiency and effectiveness of the band. And every time I have come, I found something, wow, that is a good idea. I'm going to incorporate that into my practice. And so I have always been excited just to hear what other people are doing. And being by myself, I can't just ask my partner, hey, how's, you know, what else have you found? I'm looking for out and, you know, across the country to get some of that information.
Well, you've crossed over. You're now on the faculty. You've just presented your pearls for others to take home, because this is the modern day advanced course right here. That's great stuff. And you've presented the data. I'm just going to review again. You've tried everything: billboards, Yellow Pages, TV commercials, whatever. And there's something going on now that's really different. And what do you think that, what's the secret sauce? What's happening now that's working so well?
Well, because I've done so many marketing, philosophies, approaches, that it's been hard to measure with the ReShape program that is giving information out to patients in far as, Google ads and other information out there to make patients aware. I am absolutely sure that that is the cause of the increase of the lap bands. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, because there's no other variables. Nobody else in this area really does lap bands, and suddenly I'm seeing this huge increase in numbers of lap band people that are interested in it, and it's not because any advertising that I'm actually have been doing in the last year. And so that has made a big difference in our practice. I appreciate that.
Well, great. And you're a sort of a nice little contained market. It's easy for us to know what we've done there and what happens there. So it's good for us too. It's helped us scale what we're able to plan to do for more folks like you. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it. And we will get back on the slopes eventually together. So let's move on to the next slide for our last presenter of the day. And Dr. Harold Kent, if you'll join us. Now, Dr. Kent is the gentleman that, he looks pretty good. And he's the gentleman that I impugned at the beginning of the webinar as having come back from the dead. I mean that with sincerity, love, and affection for Captain Harold Kent. We're both Navy veterans. We both spent some time at Balboa Navy Hospital, not the same years, but not too far off. He had a significantly better rank than I did, and higher up the hill. The story of the lap band rise, stagnation and fall, and now the recovery, Harold's personal practice, I just think epitomizes what happened and what's the story. Why had a lap band come back now? Is this for real? And Harold, I'll share with you that we have, Tommy and I have been talking to you and Ryan and others about this comeback and your growth in this webinar. And in the process, we've mentioned you on the webinar to other surgeons around the country and in your area. And they're like, Harold's doing bands again? Really? It's noteworthy. And so with that introduction, tell us why. What's going on, Harold?
Okay, well, if we have the first slide there, we'll kind of go through sequentially there. We started doing bariatric surgery in 2001, primarily because my ex-partner realized that he had helped train Al Whitgrove, and Al Whitgrove was now a celebrity at this point. We started with gastric bypass, and by the time we did our first lap band workshop and started doing lap bands, we'd done over 540 gastric bypasses, most of them laparoscopically. So we got proctored, and in 2005, the year that we got started with lap bands, we had to opt out of Medicare because our malpractice premium just went through the roof, and we couldn't afford to do it for Medicare anymore. So in 2006, interestingly enough, we started to do more lap bands than bypasses or anything else, and stayed that way ever since. We became a Blue Cross Blue Shield Center of Distinction. Then I reviewed hundreds of charts by hand to get them the data for this. We were just one of a handful of practices in the state that achieved that rank. Next year, we were an SRC Center of Excellence. We have the only SRC Center of Excellence south of Atlanta in the state of Georgia. In 2008, we did our first sleeves, and in 2010, after my partner left, I reverted to just doing non-stapled procedures because it was kind of like Geico. I saved a bunch of money on my insurance, and we got back to general surgery levels on the premiums. So at this point, the practice had done over 2,040 bariatric cases in total, and over half of these were lap bands, and we're going to continue to do lap bands. So it's like, well, what happened to the lap band? So let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Since 2014, we've been doing some rebranding, and we've taken out a lot of the hedge around the office. It's good to have a supportive wife who's also strong as a horse to help you do this. And after doing one very small side of the office, we've got a landscaping company to do the rest of it. I invite you to go to my personal Facebook page and check out the fact that Hillary can really clean up very nicely. Next slide, please. So we rode the lap band up and did lots and lots of cases. One year we did over 200 lap bands. And we did the practice builder seminars. The direct to consumer marketing campaigns are key for anything that we do, for anything that we can think of. And we got good reimbursements. For a while, we had a practice manager who had come from plastic surgery practice, and she was good about getting people to pay cash. And that was a really good thing too. Next slide, please. So with the recession in 2008 and some of the challenges in our practice, we had less and less cash pay. Insurance companies got wise and managed their cash flow by putting a lot of barriers to getting patients to surgery, 3 and 6 month waits, all kinds of nitpicky rules. Company support went way down, and as you know, the lap band changed from company to company to company and company, and so growth slowed. The sleeve gastrectomy came out and became the new kid on the block, and about the time that we learned how to do it. And so surgeons reverted to this because they wanted to operate. They didn't want to manage patients. Patient demand started going up for gastric sleeves because they were getting the big marketing kick. There were some practices that had bad outcomes. I think some of that is because the surgeons didn't pay attention to taking care of those particular patients. And but I just continued, kind of had no choice, and now we're starting to grow back again. Next slide, please. So you can see this shows our experience from when we started doing lap bands, and you almost have something that I hope is not a dead cat bounce right before the start of this year. We only did 3 bands last year, and this year we've already got probably 8 or 10 in the queue, and we're trying to get more. So next slide. We have patient education materials, some of which we've begged, borrowed, stolen from other places, but we now have a lap band owner's manual. It's about 75 pages. And since patients don't want to read that much, we developed a tri-fold quick start guide that gives you the quick and dirty, so that people can really get an understanding of what's important for their care and when to call the doctor. And next slide, please. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but the IME program is really good for informed consent. And if you use it, then you have ironclad, airtight documentation of the fact that the patient has had an opportunity to get more and more informed consent. If they complete this program, they can send an email list of their personal questions to you. You can answer the specific ones. You know, it's kind of fortunate. I fell into this about 15 or so years ago, I guess, and Jonathan Racklin, who is one of the principals at this company, was at a cocktail party on Sea Island, I guess, and we got to talking about this and implemented this. So this has really been a good thing for us, and they do all kinds of things. Next slide, please. So since we've gone from just bariatric surgery to metabolic and bariatric surgery, in 2014, through some happy accidents, one from a former lap band patient who now works for me, we moved into cool sculpting. And if you see the picture on the right, that's our former minor OR, and we do cool sculpting there. The middle picture is our Vanquish and Cellutone room, which used to be my ex-partner's office. And the one with Excellus is my old office, and these things kill fat cells, and Excellus tightens skin. Next slide, please. And furthermore, we have got a total body scanner so that when our patients come in, whether it's for, you know, the aesthetic non-surgical body sculpting, or if it's a lap band patient wants to see how they've improved, the body scanner can take multiple dimensions of their body from pretty much from head to toe, both arms, both legs, measure body fat and weight in 60 seconds. And the 2 pictures on the right, we've added a SkinCeutical brand of products to our armamentarium for skin care. And we also have an RN that does chemical peels and facials in this room, which used to be our former senior partner's office. And next slide. So this is one of our advertising modalities. I'm not entirely sure it's got that much return on investment, but it's exclusive to us right now. So none of our competitors can advertise this and the things that we do on this board. The other thing is this electronic board is the first electronic billboard that you see when you come off the causeway coming from Sea Island and St. Simon's Island. and that's where the high pain demographic is in our area. Next slide. We also have exclusivity for the inside cover advertising in Paisley Magazine, which is a magazine that's sent out and is a woman-centered type magazine. It's a pretty nice magazine. So we can advertise whatever we want on the inside cover. And we can advertise lap banding and any of the other things that we do. We've just affiliated with an out-of-town plastic surgeon to come into the practice and offer consults. And hopefully that's going to be a good thing for both of us. Next slide. Nice thing about Paisley, since I'm a pain contributor and I'm also a solo general surgeon doing primarily lap bands at this point, we can do contributions to Paisley, which puts us up in the realm of we see in print, we know you're an expert. Next slide. Occasionally I'll write things that are out of my comfort zone, although I try and stick with weight loss as much as I can. And you can see there are 3 surgeons here that have advertised. One's a hospital employed surgeon who does only sleeves. I do only lap bands, and the middle surgeon's a plastic surgeon here locally. Next slide. And I think this is one of my favorite things about Paisley Magazine. We can get one of our patients, and for us it's our lap band patients, and show their success as far as not only their weight loss, but they can get a whole makeover. They get a new wardrobe to wear for these pictures, sometimes have facials, Botox, get their hair done, and get made up by a professional makeup artist. The girl on the right is the first lap band patient to ask me about cool sculpting, and I found out about it and decided we could go for it. And she now works as our receptionist. After as a school teacher from about 45 or 50 miles out of town. She had a 100-pound weight loss or more, and she's just a little tiny thing, just barely over 5. She's dolled up and looking like this, and I think this is a really effective way to advertise. Next slide, please. This next patient in the next slide is a patient who's kind of challenging for adjustments. I had to de-adjust. We have the next slide for adjustments. I had to de-adjust. Next slide, please. Oh, network action. Well, I hope you can still hear me. There we go. Anyway, this gal works at one of the local prisons around here, and she had really pretty good weight loss. So since we started all this, we used to do seminars once a week in our heyday. We're in a small community. If we attracted 12 or 15 people, that would fill up our reception area, and that started to dwindle down. And we've now moved to open house events, which I think are good because we do aesthetic demonstrations. We have our lap band literature out. I think the other nice thing is people can come up and buttonhole the surgeon and ask them all the questions they want, and I'll stand there and talk to you. And if you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a clock. My wife tells me that all the time. And now we're using Facebook more and more. People seem to like our little Facebook Live presentations, and we're getting great ads now from ReShape. Next slide. There we go. So why I come back now? Well, I believe that the lap band works, and I believe that the patient has to do their part. They have to show up for adjustments. They have to show up when they're in trouble, and they have to eat correctly. And I have to sit there and listen to them and try and get inside their head and try to make them be successful. And as Vern pointed out to me in pre-seminar talk, you know, there was corporate neglect for the banding, and the sleeve got off, and you know, then we had social media come along, and people are hearing about the sleeve. People still want the band. We still see people coming and making inquiries, and that interest has really started to come up. And during COVID, you know, it's really the least invasive thing that we could do, and it's still the least invasive thing that we could do. Next slide. So I think the thing is, at least ReShape's behind us now. They've grown their sales team, and they're in it to win it. I think these webinars have been encouraging, especially for me, because here I am kind of wondering if I was alone crying out in the wilderness. And it means to me there's still some surgeons that are out there doing lap bands. And I really appreciate these seminars because I learn a lot. And the presentations tonight have been very good too. And this is a great time to promote the lap band. The pandemic's ending. We got support behind us. I'm seeing more little videos and testimonials on Facebook, which is what we really need, is that direct to consumer reporting. So I thought about you know, the lap band coming back. And I'm just thinking, you know, that we're going back to the future now, and thinking about Marty McFly coming back in the past from a not very good future, and he was able to change the future and come back to a really good future. So we're going back to that future now. So anyway, I think that's all my slide deck right now, and I'll be around like everybody else to take questions. Oh, here's my crew. And I've been here for 33 years, and my blonde nurse here has been with me for 14 years. I'm the old man on the team and the last man standing and almost a lone survivor here.
Well, we're very happy for that, Harold. Thank you very much for that arc of your career. And seriously, as we have re-engaged surgeons across the country and been present and continued to show up and provide them with resources and marketing assistance, then they're actually believing, and you, as you have done, you believed that we're real, and attending the webinars, the synergy of it all together, demonstrating that there is an opportunity to come back to the future. So have the whole faculty come back for a quick minute. We are right at the end of our time, but there are a couple of questions I'd like to ask. Harold, first, do you do your cases, some or all, in an outpatient center or in a hospital?
We do most of them in the hospital, but everyone that I think is in good shape and good anatomically and without prior upper abdominal surgery, I'll take over the surgery center. We have a freestanding multi-specialty surgery center, and I started doing this in about 2006 or 7 when the hospital would negotiate, as Darren noted, and they couldn't understand why I would do that. And so it's very easy for me. If they can't afford what you want them to pay, and they can afford what they can pay at the surgery center, that way I get paid too. I don't get paid if the only place is the hospital. And they've been very good to me. It was a little hiccupy to start with, and operating with an arthroscopic cancer camera a couple of times was kind of suboptimal, and it really kind of made me wonder if I was in the right place, but it's gotten much better. So we go over there and do cases.
Yeah, good. The growth we've seen is almost linear to the practices that have access to or develop an outpatient opportunity. Patients are very interested, and as you attended one of our prior webinars, was very much on that topic. Christine, question for you. For all these promotions and different things, you're in a big university in a big hot city. What are the challenges specific to you to promote lap bands right now?
Well, we certainly have a lot of competitors, a lot of academic centers, community centers, and private practices that are performing bariatric surgery. But I think on the positive side, we're the only program that's doing lap bands. So when patients are seen at another academic center in Manhattan and they want to have lap bands, and when the surgeon says, well, no one does lap bands anymore, they usually find us. And so we get everyone's patients who want bariatric surgery but are not able to get lap band surgery at other places. So the competition is there for all the other operations, but for lap band, it's actually been a really good thing.
Yeah, exactly. And as was pointed out by everyone, people don't all want the other procedures, or they'd have them. They're not rushing in the door to have them. And Darren, from your perspective, is that the same in your environment, that people who don't want more aggressive surgeries are finding you intentionally or by accident?
Yes, as you mentioned, I'm a little bit unique, that not like Chris said, there's not very many people who are really doing lap bands. And so if they do their research and find out about a lap band, hey, that's something I'm interested in, they type in, online, they will find me. I don't have a huge amount of competition, I guess, like you have, Chris, but there's only a handful of places in the Salt Lake Valley. And so they will find it. And a lot of it is education. They are interested in that and come to find out, oh yes, this is a very viable, good option for them. That's the biggest part that I need for them to then, find me, so to speak.
Very good. We continue to address the myths, as was one of the first webinars. George was on the faculty for that one, the myth busters, that nobody wants these. Well, if they know it exists, if they know it's available, which that's our job, and marketing is growing and steadily keeping up with that challenge, then they actually are interested. And one thing that we discovered this year is we called around and sort of surveyed your peers. Very common response was that patients today, when you say, well, you've thought about a sleeve or something else, young woman thinks about getting pregnant, for instance, comes in and asks for a sleeve. If you ask them, have you considered a lap band? Half of those patients' answer is, what's that? There's a new opportunity. Time has passed long enough. So our Back to the Future, some of them, there's a fresh slate. It's a long conversation. Prep them for the negative they're going to find when they go home and Google it. But with a good program, with a team that's dedicated. Chris, you pointed out the adjuvant care with all the medications. That comment intrinsically says you're managing your patients medically. You're their doctor. You're not just their surgeon. And that is the core difference for a lap band. It can't just be a surgical event. We're past our time, and the audience has been patiently hanging on. We did have quite a turnout. I want to thank you all very much. And if there's any other questions that come in after we didn't get to, I'll get to you for your specific answers. So thank you, everyone, for your patience and the tolerance with running over a little bit. I hope it was worth your time. Look for the next announcement. We'll be doing this again soon on a continuous series. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.